Yes, we can. Scott, we see you connected. It looks like you're muted at the moment. Hmm. Can you hear us? Blink once.
Talk to us, Scott.
Huh. And Rory's not able to make it. He just sent me a message. Hmm. Scott is our chairman of the zoning uh, board.
Hi, Scott. You can hear us.
All right. I don't know. Well, I think we just got to start. It's gonna wait. So, yeah, I don't know. However you want to do. Do you want to just talk about it a little bit, or we can just start asking questions?
Happy to just get covered with questions or I can start pulling up slides if you want. Maybe that'll spark something.
Yeah, let's do that. That's a good.
Bring this slide because it might be a little clunky. Maybe it's first good. I understand the other topic y'all were interested in was agrivoltaics. It's great. Great.
Yes.
Like just sort of talking about what we're doing in
Okay.
that space.
Sure.
Not that we can necessarily force anything on the two existing projects, but we kind of slid to know.
Yeah, we did. We're gonna put open it up to bees and whatever. You know.
More.
Well, yeah, I'm saying, but that's what they agreed to for the current project.
Okay.
We had them.
That's great.
The land. What is it? Milkweed? No, what's the thing that?
We're planting, well, that's for the butterfly.
Right, and they're gonna have big bees and a couple of bat houses. Nothing crazy, and then, but of course, the rest of the property is gonna be. So
And I saw that the scenic Hudson portion, they said they're also reserving like 5 acres for future farming.
for a homestead, so if somebody wants to put a home there and then work the farm. So there's a 5 acre.
Have that option.
Right. Right now it's contract farmer. Who does a lot of, it's just, they just farm people's land all out there. All right. So that can't go.
There's not enough room, so.
Okay.
Take the copy, but it's.
Oh,
It should be.
whoa.
One, three. Whoa. I swear, all I did was say full screen for the PowerPoint.
You clicked it?
Yeah. There it goes. Nice, maybe. Okay, I just needed a minute to catch up. Sounds good. Yeah, there's sometimes a lag. Yeah, a little bit of a lag.
Are you just recording or are you transmitting?
I'm live.
You are live. We are live.
Yeah, so I won't bore you too much with the state goals, but we have ambitious goals in the state. Lots of solar needs to be developed. We have certain timelines we need to meet it by 70% renewable energy by 2030, 100% emissions free by 2040. So hence why, you're seeing projects pop up in your town. You're not alone. I assure you, they are popping up all over the state. Some, much bigger than this, and all the towns are facing most of the same issues, right? With some, uniqueness here and there. If you guys want me to dive into a little bit more of the technology, I always include something like this just in case folks aren't on the same page. But I'm guessing after all the review that you've gone through over the last couple of years, you don't really need a primer on what solar PV is. The permitting regime, we brought this up a little bit before the meeting started. One interesting change, as you'll notice at the bottom, I got a little strike out there. The projects between 20 and 25 megawatts used to be able to opt in to the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, which is the state agency authorized to permit larger projects like that. When they switched over recently, sort of redid the legislation through Article 8 now, it's no longer 94C, it's now Article 8, and transmission was added in. that new Article 8 language omitted the 20 to 25 megawatt opt-in. So currently, that's not a thing anymore. So it's just 25 megawatts and above at the state level, unless that changes in the future. So I just wanted to point that out, especially since it got brought up. And so any project 25 megawatts and above is going to be at the state level. Everything else is permitted locally using seeker, as you know. For energy storage, should that come up in your future, which I would say is probably likely in the coming years. If it's co-located with one of those state level permitted projects, it'll go through the state process. If it's not co-located, it's permitted locally regardless of size. So you could get a 30 megawatt energy storage project. If it's standalone and not co-located with one of those, you'll be permitting it at the town level. Again, unless something changes, that's currently how it's set up. More sort of just state level stuff for your awareness. There's some pretty major grid infrastructure things happening. Our tier 4, we refer to it as our tier 4 program at NYSERDA. It's basically our funding mechanism for some large scale transmission lines to get energy where it's needed most, right? Which for the most part is New York City. So there's one big line that'll be coming down Canada, and another line that'll be coming like from South Central New York, I guess you could call it, and also going into the city. Lots of NYPA investments around the state too, with respect to, both generation and transmission and distribution infrastructure. NYPA's the New York Power Authority, separate from NYSERDA. They actually own generation, they run Niagara Falls, all of that. So basically a state utility, if you will. They're doing stuff too. All the investor-owned utilities are doing stuff. So there's a lot of stuff happening.
Do you have any awareness of anything's happening in this local area? Anything will
don't
impact us in a major way.
Anything in this exact area. I have to double check the plan for that line that I mentioned that will be coming down from Canada down to New York City. But if it was coming through, you should know about it by now. They've already started like building stuff for that. It's sort of underway.
Was that the project in Clinton? They redid all that transmission line in Clinton?
Well, the power line that goes over between Randolph and Rhinebeck has been they put in a whole new line there. But along side the old line. Same area, but new poles and heavy duty stuff. But that's far enough from us at the moment that's not
it's nothing
something that we're
it would not affect.
You would, I believe, provide it. That's happening. I can double check that. Play that for another time. But in summary, lots of infrastructure happening. So even when we do go into those, what we call utility hosting capacity maps, where you look at the lines in your town to see where, future development might go. I mean, it could change in the future, right?
Sure.
Because there is a lot of investment going on in the infrastructure. So that's sort of the point. It's just, there's stuff happening. So even when we look at the map now, it's not necessarily static for, the next decade or so. Same thing with generation. So not just the distribution lines and things. We have our New York Sun program that incentivizes all of the solar projects basically that would happen in the state 5 megawatts and below. So anything from residential rooftop all the way up to like the size of the projects that you guys have coming in 5 megawatts each that we refer to. Typically, those are community solar projects. Local folks will be subscribing and getting the benefit from those. It's like a set rate, cents per kilowatt installed. If you do the project, you get the money. It's easy peasy. And then we have our large scale renewables program. I don't believe you have any large scale projects coming here at the moment. I suppose that could change if there's space. I don't know that there is when we did the maps though. But that's a competitive solicitation we run every year, and that funds. There's not really a size cutoff, but it tends to be more like 20 megawatts and above. They could be smaller, but you just don't see it because why would they do that when they can just go through the new easy peasy New York Sun program? We end up funding typically around like 20 large scale projects per year all across the state. They bid in, and it's just a competitive process, mostly based on price. And when I say price, that is they, offer NYSERDA a dollar amount basically for us to purchase the renewable energy certificates for those projects once they're up and running. So once those large projects are built, they're pushing green electrons into the grid. they look back at the contract and say, okay, we're gonna purchase the credits associated with those green electrons at the rate we agreed upon now that you're, pushing them into the grid. So that's what those contracts are. They don't get a penny from us until they're operating. That's a common misconception that we're just like throwing money out the door for them to build them, and that's not the case. In fact, they give us money as a deposit to guarantee that they will put them in if they. So that's our large scale renewables program, just a competitive funding source for most of those, utility scale projects. And then separately, we have an offshore wind program, sort of similar competitive process, but with fewer, much larger projects that we're funding offshore. Not something you're going to have to read about here, but nice to know that's going on. Energy storage, I touched on briefly too, similar to solar. We have incentive programs for energy storage and a lot of ambitious goals there. Of course, sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. So if we're going to be using all this renewable energy, we need to make sure we have it when we need it. Enter energy storage. There's other ancillary benefits too, like making the grid more reliable, avoiding blackouts and brownouts, things like that. But we could spend 2 hours talking about all the different benefits. It's easier just to think of it as the sun's not always shining, the wind's not always blowing. We have batteries to store it for when we need it. So lots of incentives and energy storage popping up too.
And that's all just batteries. That's all.
Right now, it's mostly lithium-ion batteries. My friends over in our research and development side of the shop are looking at other technologies too. And I believe our energy storage program is technology agnostic. It's just that lithium-ion is the predominant technology right now. But compressed air energy storage, for example, is perhaps a larger, more longer-term energy storage system that we might see popping up in the future. So think some big underground cavern somewhere, pump a bunch of compressed air in there and then pull it out as you need it. And that would be more of days worth versus hours worth that you're seeing with the batteries. So
generally that's all along the main grids coming down, and the highways of what I'm going to say is how you're transporting it. It's not going to be miles away, right?
probably not, but I mean, if there is a really great spot somewhere and you have to build another line, just like with a large solar project, right? Sometimes they're sited a couple miles from where they want to interconnect, and they'll just build a line if the economics work out. So I don't want to speculate too much on where they would go. I'm also not an expert in all those different types of technologies, but just know that right now it's lithium ion, but I'm sure we're going to see other longer duration energy storage technologies probably pop up in the future too. And of course, lots of energy efficiency, electrification, weatherization stuff going on too. Your incentives to make their homes more efficient and all of that stuff. Lots going on. So I know you were interested in agrivoltaics, so I want to touch on that a little bit. And this slide, full disclosure, is from, you can see the source in the bottom right there. That's a report that was actually put out by the Alliance for Clean Energy in New York, which is an industry association. So full disclosure, this is not ours. I just think that it's a nice graphic illustration of just leveling our understanding of what's going on a little bit, because of course, no one wants to see farmland disappear unnecessarily, but to put it in perspective, by 2040, the type of low density suburban development we've been seeing and the rate at which that's been happening is going to take up, far more land than if we meet all of our solar goals by 2040 at the same time. So the green dots up there, or the green squares, if you will, represent the total agricultural land in New York State. The darker blue represent what we might expect to see in low density suburban development by 2040, and the brighter blue dots, what we might expect to see in solar taking up, by the same year. So I just like to put it in perspective. Solar is not going to take all of the farmland. Of course, there will be places in the state that have better infrastructure with more capacity on the lines for projects to put in. So certain towns will probably see more relative to other towns, but as a whole, relatively small percentage of total programs. So just like to level set there. I put this slide up, and again, you guys have probably looked into this because you've had a law in the books for a long time and you've gone through projects, but just know that, these resources are out there to look at what the mineral soil groups are in your town, where the active agricultural land, where the prime farmland is. And we'll go into some slides a little bit later, but when we start overlaying, these types of maps with utility infrastructure, you start to get a much better lay of the land, like, all right, so, there's a transmission line over here and it's not intersecting with mineral soil groups 1 through 4, we don't really have our prime farmland there. Maybe that's a good spot for us to encourage solar development. And maybe we want to, have stricter regulations in a different part of town, something like that.
For this project, that went to ag markets and they came back with that chart. Knows, no soils of, it's whatever, none of those
They
were
were
involved.
generally okay with
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And that is the thing, all of the projects that touch, a certain amount of the important soils, ag markets, so they'd be looking at it and making sure it's good to go from their perspective. So agrivoltaics, a lot we can talk about there. There's a bunch of reasons to do it. And it goes beyond, what your projects are doing is great. Pollinators, I haven't heard too many projects doing bat habitat, but I think that's pretty cool too. Anything that keeps nature going, I think is a great thing. There's lots of other stuff we can do as well. And there's benefits to it in general. So to picture, a solar project that just puts grass under it, right? Like, that's not going to be great. There might be more runoff. You have to mow it, but not doing anything for the environment really. It's just sort of there. But if we can encourage these projects to do other things, like you can see the pollinators in the left side there, the left side picture, bottom left, in the middle, we have folks actually, growing vegetables and things under solar panels. There are some crops that, do better with a little bit of shade. And the sheep grazing on the right, and we're starting to explore other uses beyond those that are tried and true. I wouldn't say, veggie growing is necessarily tried and true. Most of what I've seen, those are still sort of pilot projects right now. And we're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't under them. But, pollinators and grazing sheep seem to be sort of a no-brainer. It works. Sheep fit under just your typical, you don't have to raise the panels up or anything. They keep the grass mowed. And what's nice about those is a lot of the things that you're planting, not just for the sheep or the pollinators, but they're, deep rooted. They can actually improve the soil over time and retain water. And I'm not sure what your watershed looks like here, but I've heard from some folks that are maybe smarter than me in the hydrology department, if you will. Some of these projects can actually improve your water quality in the region. If you're planting things like those pollinators that are going to be like filtering out water, and particularly if you're perhaps displacing some agriculture that was using, heavy fertilizers, things like that we're going to get into your drinking water, this can actually be a water quality benefit depending on what's there and where it's sited, right? So just lots of good stuff to think about with agrivoltaics and what NYSERDA and the state are doing. Again, can't necessarily force any of this on the existing projects, but I always think it's interesting to share with folks. Any solar project, be it through that, first come, first serve New York Sun program that I was speaking about for the smaller ones, or through our large scale renewables, that competitive solicitation, anything that's affecting more than 30 acres of mineral soil groups 1 through 4 has to do an ag mitigation payment before they can get an incentive from us. And the dollar amounts increase as you cover more of the better soils. There's like a different set dollar amount per acre, depending on the soil quality. So they do have to pay for that if they're affecting more than 30 acres. Our large scale renewables program has a smart solar siting scorecard associated with it. That's part of the scoring for those projects. So to the extent those projects, avoid ag land and or do great mitigation measures, like for example, agrivoltaics, doing farming on the same plot, they get more points and are viewed more favorably in that competitive solicitation.
Is it hard to find like the farmers because they were kind of like the applicant list? You're like, oh, we don't really do it. It's kind of like we would have to come up with the farmer talk.
I mean, it's possible. It's a little bit TBD when it comes to anything other than the sheep and the pollinators and the bees. Folks have been doing that, and the American Solar Grazing Association has been working for years now to do some of that matchmaking with sheep farmers and projects. So ASGA, ASGA, on their website, I believe they have like a matchmaking service on there with a map of, hi, I'm a grazer, hi, I'm a solar project, and match them up. But again, that's just for sheep grazing right now, as I understand it. A little bit farther down on this slide, is our agrivoltaics demonstration RFP, request for proposals. So a solicitation basically where that's open right now. Most of us are due in September. We're trying to figure this out because we haven't seen projects in New York that have like cattle grazing or growing a bunch of different vegetables under them or something like that. So right now we have $5 million on the street. It's not a ton in the grand scheme of things, but we want to get some pilot projects going, like show us you can do a solar project with something other than sheep or other than, pollinators, bees, and let's see what it takes to do it. Can you find the farmers? Like, what can you grow? Where can you grow it? What are the economics? Do we need to change our incentive structure? Can we change our incentive structure? Do the economics work out? So we don't have all the answers yet, but we are actively trying to find them. But to that end, just late last year, that report that you see in the left image there, growing agrivoltaics in New York State, we put that out. It has a ton of just information about us trying to figure all this stuff out. So this is really your thing that you're into. Highly recommend at least skimming it. We have a whole website, the very bottom link, the last bullet up there, the NYSERDA Agrivoltaics website is basically just like a whole list of resources. You can find that report on there. There should be a link to the agrivoltaics demonstration RFP on there too. Most of these are live links to anything that's underlined. We also have in the works right now, the 1, 2, 3, 4th from the bottom bullet, the regional agronomic impact from solar energy study. A lot of folks have raised concerns over the years that if you're not just, taking this particular piece of ag land out of production, they're worried about the more regional effects on the economy. Is the ag really going to shut down if we have too many, because no one's going to go there to buy their farm supplies, right? And so that study is basically trying to answer that question. What are the regional economic impacts from this across the state? So again, not exactly have answers yet, but trying to find them, heard loud and clear. And then like that $5 million I mentioned with the agrivoltaics demonstration RFP, there's more where that came from. That's just like from this funding cycle, but in total, in the 2024 Reggie operating plan, we got $27 million to sort of look at that issue and figure things out. So I'm hopeful that if the projects from that demonstration RFP go well, we'll be able to use 22 million that's left over in the coming years to do some more. Solve that problem somehow if you development. And then finally, I'm kind of going backwards on this slide now. So the last the three small bullets at the top there, in our New York Sun program. And again, this is funding project side from residential up through 5 megawatts. We have just added incentives for those if you're doing good stuff, right? So if you site your project on a landfill or a brownfield, you get an extra 15 cents per watt for your project. We actually have a floating photovoltaic adder now too, which is the same 15 cents per watt. We put it on like a reservoir. The city of Cohoes, up just by Albany, is actually doing a solar project on their reservoir. Just kind of cool. I think they're the first one in the state, so they'll be the guinea pigs. But it's another way of just like avoiding, the prime ag tandem, trying to divert projects from where people don't want them. And soon, I'm saying maybe an agrivoltaics adder on there. We just don't know what it should be yet until we do some of those demonstration projects. Let's see what all the costs are, but I'm hopeful. I'd be very surprised if in the future we don't have an agrivoltaics or just straight adder in that New York Sun program. So in summary, a lot going on there. I guess the moral of the story there is we care about that.
Seeing situations where someone who's actively farming comes to you and wants to have a piece of their land put into solar to get the income from that to be able to continue the farming operation, because I think that's incredibly valuable.
Yes.
To have a piece of someone's farm and maybe a non-productive piece of the farm and to actively engage with the farmer to make that.
Do you want to come work at NYSERDA? Because that's exactly it. I can't rattle off exact, property owners, exact farmers off the top of my head, but that's the story we hear over and over again, is that can actually help save a farm.
Well,
like you said, particularly if you take the spots that aren't as good.
Exactly. That's what you and you want to keep the farmers viable. And there's a lot of issues about viability of farming, and so much farmland is now not owned by people farming it. They're getting other people to farm it, which is not a wonderful solution for the country in general. That's a national problem or national issue.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, but I think when we put that agrivoltaics demonstration solicitation together, I believe we said that we would look more favorably on projects that were able to retain like a current farmer on the land, particularly if they're a renting farmer, because we've heard that issue too, like the renters have no control of it and they get picked off and then they have nowhere to.
Nowhere to farm. Exactly. So there needs to be a sort of a cooperation among the different elements to make these things happen in a way that makes sense for everybody.
Yeah, it's not simple.
No,
But the other, I mean, like to go back to that first slide, you know, with the little squares on it. But if a farm's not viable, right, and a farmer has to like sell out the farm, sell the farm. It could end up, you know, becoming permanent low density infrastructure in perpetuity versus a solar project in the future. You actually can, you know, take it back out. We need that one in the future to farm, right? And the soil may be better because it's been able to sit for 30 years and regenerate. So that's lots of stuff.
around here, we've had a number of times where DLC actually will come in with an owner to the planning board, put their land into farm conservancy where they get money from the state. And so that goes into a certain conservancy. Are there any opportunities to go back and put solar on any of that farmland that's gone through that program? Because the planning board has seen a number of those projects where DLC comes in here.
Right, for the conservation easement.
Yes, whether that.
It's all dependent on how the conservation easement's written, right, and what they're.
But see, that's a big issue, conservation easements, because if that isn't permitted, then that land is never available
Right,
for solar.
you know, likely they're not, when, especially ones that are written.
That's what I'm concerned about, and you know, that's something that like needs to be looked at.
And that's why I had the county, they did a map for me of any easements that they knew of in our area. Especially over in that area, so, like, you know, at least 2/3, if not 3/4 of all the properties in that area over near the transmission line.
But those
are
are
in-
private, those are privately done, and not where the state comes and helps the farmer.
Well, a lot of times they're getting money from whether it's the USDA, whether it's national, whether it's the state or whatever. The reason that they're coming to the board is because that's one of the requirements is the town has to be on board before any of the state funds or the federal funds come in there. So, you know, really the state and the federal need to get on the same page interagency, which, you know, I can see is difficult, but I completely agree that, you know, that should be wide open to be able to do. I agree with it.
So we should definitely be thinking about
Yeah.
if there's a portion of land that could be put into that. To make that an issue, or at least for the money coming from the state. For those conservatives.
Yeah. I think that's cool. I don't know that we're gonna solve that particular issue if you're precisely going back and I assume rewriting those agreements to make it happen.
No, I think it's probably going forward.
Going forward, these members,
Keep options open.
yeah,
And I'm sure that Scenic Hudson is like looking into that as well. Yeah, if you're on that topic, right? Yeah.
well, that is a conversation that has been happening though. Waiting on, you know, which land trust we've talked to about it, but there was, you know, a conference the last couple of years in a row up in Saratoga with a bunch of land trusts and Blake County conference was, and we participated in the panel about for 2 years now, talking about this idea of trying to get land trusts on board during project development to put an easement on it, you know, that allows solar and farming perpetuity or for however many years, right? Maybe solar for the next 30, farming forever, or whatever it may be. I think it's a great strategy. We haven't been seeing it enough, and I hope to see it more because, at least from my perspective, we've been talking about it with the right people for 2 or 3 years now. So hopefully it's happening more. It sounds like Scenic Hudson's on board, so that's great. Great ideas. I like that. Again, so in summary, we're doing a lot to try to figure out photovoltaics and care about it. Basically, we're smart to do all this stuff. If you haven't seen, I'm not sure what version of our model law that you guys were using. I'm guessing it was prior to us making some of these little tweaks in here, because these were just like in the last year and a half or so. But we made some tweaks in the model law to try and encourage agrivoltaics too. So for example, on the top part here in tier 3 and tier 4, just refer to the different sizes of systems, tier 4 being the largest utility scale. Tier 3, I believe, goes up to 5 megawatts in the law. So don't pay too much attention to that. This is all like sort of large systems, if you will.
Well, we have our own, we use similar language. We went from tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, one will.
So probably our old one only went up to tier 3, so you probably weren't what makes sense. So we used to just say occupy no more than 50% of mineral soil groups 1 through 4. And that can be an issue too, because it can create an unintentional patchwork of solar panels in the field versus trying to consolidate them maybe to 100% coverage of feed parcels and not some others. So a little bit problematic. And so we included the bullet after that. This says the review board can exempt portions of it. If it's not viable, but you can exceed that threshold if you actually do some farming on it. So you can cover up to 100% of mineral soil groups 1 through 4 if you're going to continue to use all of that land to do some sort of actual agriculture. I skipped ahead to the exemption part, but say there's 100 acres of MSG 1 through 4, 20 acres of it has a bunch of boulders in it or something, and you wouldn't be able to farm there at all. You can make the decision to say that 20 acres doesn't count. So it's right, because no one would be farming it anyway for whatever reason. And then on top of that, for the even larger projects, tier 4, the bigger utility scale projects, there's one more layer of not just mineral soil groups 1 through 4, but any active agricultural lands, things that were currently being farmed. That's sort of the same logic flows there. Don't cover more than 50% of those lands unless you're going to farm, basically. So we added that stuff in to try and encourage agrivoltaics rather than just put the hammer down on that in general. Questions for them? And this image is actually a project in New York. Just very recently finished. So you can see it actually can happen. I forget what they're doing there. I want to say it was like hay or something. I could get the information. I just can't remember off the top of my head. But it's fun that we're actually starting to see a couple of things popping up here. And that wasn't even part of our demonstration or piece, which is even nicer to sort of do it. All right, so if you want, we can start hopping into grid infrastructure. I am not going to go through every word on this. You're more than welcome to keep the slide deck beside a computer there and share it if you want. But basically, transmission lines, they're the big ones that bring a lot of electricity long distances, right? Super high voltage, anything basically above 5 megawatts, I would say, is probably going to need to be close to those. And then the smaller projects, like what you see here, 5 megawatts and below, they can just plug into those local distribution lines that are lower voltages, the things that are, carrying electricity through the town and into your home.
So when you say that, so just because it's 5 megawatts and make 10, it's still considered 5 megawatts and make it.
Yep, they each get studied individually when they're asking permission to plug into the distribution lines. And I believe 5 megawatts is the maximum. I'm not a total expert in the interconnection process. I keep meaning to become one, but I'm not. I believe they're each studied individually, and the max is 5 megawatts for plugging into a distribution lines. Otherwise, if they wanted to plug them in together, it'd be a whole more expensive, more drawn out, sort of crazy process. So for ease of interconnection, they're separated into 2 projects of the max capacity that can separately plug in. Yeah, I think. Yeah, most of this we sort of covered, most of the projects that'll be plugging into the distribution lines are gonna be those locally permitted projects, and most of the ones that need. Transmission lines around are gonna be permitted at the state level. They also have very different revenue models, and then I would not be the person to explain the intricate revenue models of these electricity projects to you. But the larger ones sell power in the wholesale market, which is a very different animal versus the small ones that are just in the retail market. It's a lot more predictable.
Well, from what we understood from the applicant, there's a lot of state programs, even the federal programs too, but I guess go into the calculus of whether or not the product's viable.
Again, I am not the one to try to understand, to explain their revenue streams, but it's not just you plug in and get X cents, per kilowatt hour that you put in the grid. It depends on where you're located. If it's an area of like high congestion that needs more power, you're gonna get more revenue from your project for locating there. That's one example. Yeah. If you want, afterwards, I can probably follow up with a little chart. And if you wanted to look at
It
it
was just a bit opaque, was they kept mentioning things like, oh, we're applying for this program or that program. It seemed to affect their timeline, but we didn't know what it was and or to even know. We're trusting them what they said, but
yeah, I mean, if
Same
they're
thing,
saying
believe in,
specific things like that in the future, they have a question about, just feel free to reach out. It'll be much easier for us to respond. Oh, they said this program, what's that?
right.
We'll look it up.
And also the programs that could benefit the residents. I know we sign up,
Okay.
we'll get 10% off or something.
Yep, so community solar projects, which most projects between like 1 and 5 megawatts are gonna be community solar projects where they have defined off takers. So like people that are gonna benefit from the electricity they're generating locally. For example, I live in the middle of Albany. I have a very, very, very old house that I'm not putting solar panels on the roof right now. My solar comes from a solar farm that's like out on the outskirts, in a field somewhere, and the solar farm's this big. I have this much of it that comes off my electricity bill every month. So like those are my solar panels, basically. That's how community solar works. And for the electricity, the portion of it anyway that I'm getting from that is like 10% cheaper than what I would have gotten paying for those kilowatt hours through National Grid.
Is there programs for?
And NYSERDA has sort of layered incentives on for projects that are doing that. You get like a community adder for being a community solar project, you get a little bit more. There's another program, through like Solar for All, basically the same sort of structure, but targeting low income households. And I think they get an even bigger chunk off, maybe like a 20% discount. Don't quote me on any of these numbers. I'd have to get one of my
I think that's what they
some colleagues in here. Yeah, so they were probably talking about some of those, like trying to make their project. But any of those were like certain people get a little bit more revenue in. But generally speaking, they get their revenue through a process called VDER. It's a value distributed energy resources, VDER. So if you look that up, you can kind of see like sort of the different inputs. Like I was saying, it depends on where you're located. For example, there's a whole bunch of things that go into how much money a project is going to make for the electricity that it puts out. It's complicated. So did my explanation of community solar sort of make sense? So this is just sort of showing you guys on the state, and I think later on we sort of zoom in a little bit into the transmission infrastructure here. But finding transmission line information is a little bit tricky because apparently it's a security issue, like a security issue, right? And if folks know where they are, there are maps out there, but they're not so easily accessible. The local distribution lines you can find very easily from all the utilities. They have the distribution maps posted online for anyone to see. Kind of individual lines and see how much capacity is on it, like how much more energy could possibly flow through it, like how much extra space is left in a water pipe, for example, sort of like that. The transmission lines are a little bit trickier, like, but they are out there. So basically, what some of the following slides are gonna do is just sort of illustrate how you might go about layering different layers of your town onto those different maps, right? Distribution lines and transmission lines, look at your zoning, look at where your mineral soil groups are, and just sort of start layering everything on and get a lay of the land and think about where solar could possibly go in the future.
So Hudson has been doing that.
Yeah, Scenic Hudson has a great mapping tool for that. Yep. They actually are one of the few places where you can actually find the transmission lines and the distribution lines and many of those other layers. So I don't think we actually got screenshots from that tool on here, although that is been. Yes, and sort of like I mentioned earlier, it could change over time. So the temporality, right? As more of those grid upgrades happen in the future, this can change. So just know, and as projects plug in, one line that looked like it used to have capacity on it, a project plugs in, maybe it doesn't have capacity happening, or so you don't have to worry about any more projects in that particular part community until once an upgrade is done. So, sure.
Who could tell us that? I mean, we only have really the one transmission or distribution or whatever. The high capacity lines comes in from Columbia County, goes through that substation, but out into the town in Northeast.
I don't know where we would find information other than, via the utilities. I don't know that they have great information about where planned upgrades are happening.
Or just like how much is capacity is available now. Very,
on the transmission line.
the line that they're tapping into, is that a distribution line or transmission?
It's a problem.
Okay, so.
Yeah, that's
like-
where you find. Here, sorry, so. Turning this on, guys. But all of the utilities have posting capacity maps on their websites that are publicly accessible, but also from NYSERDA. And so that's, I guess, which the screenshots from. We've, in the last few years, been putting on the bottom right there where it says the source, the NYSERDA Integrated Energy Data Resource, IEDR, has put all of those hosting capacity maps together in one place. And we're starting to add other layers to that tool as well, much like the Scenic Hudson solar mapping tool, but with a bunch of other stuff in there as well. So that's one way to find them. You can also choose to keep these to the Scenic Hudson tool. I think right now for your area, the Scenic Hudson tool might actually have more layers in it than we maybe incorporate this July one. Yeah, so there's a couple places. Anyway, so when you pull up on the hosting capacity maps, and again, this is not the big transmission lines. This is just projects like 5 megawatts and below where they would plug in. They're color coded. The darker blue, the lighter blue, into the greens, they have more capacity. And as you start to get into yellows and reds, those lines have less capacity, and they'll actually show you how much room they have on them. So the darker blue have more than 5 megawatts of capacity. I'm guessing your project's plugged in or planning to plug into one of those. So step one, basically pull up hosting capacity map. There's your high voltage transmission lines. There, sort of layering stuff. Take your zoning map, right? Take a look at that, just sort of layer over everything and start getting a lay of the land. So out here on the right hand side is where you might expect some larger projects to potentially come in there in the future.
That's right. So that's right. So the one you see where the orange one meets the blue right there. Well, right at the top of the orange thing is the substation. And then that little triangle, that's the beginning of that parcel, that where the project, see that triangle to the south? Yeah, just to the left of it. So according to this, though, so can someone put something, if we go over here on the left side where I'm not totally sure what shade of blue that is.
It looks to me like it's the bright green over here.
Bright green, and then what
Yeah,
about
so
the,
1.5 megawatts, 2 megawatts, potentially see some other like smaller projects over there, assuming there's space.
there's
and-
space.
And willing landowners. Yeah,
But so what about the blue that's over there? The green flows down into basically that's Route 199. Where the blue, what color blue is that exactly? Is that the 5? Is it that one?
it's actually a little bit hard to tell which it is, but somewhere between, 2 and 5 megawatts, I think.
So something,
3 to 5, rather,
so a 5 megawatt could be put over there?
potentially.
So
But
and
there could also be projects ahead of them, but it's just a label. I'm not saying they will run there, but it's where it's technically maybe feasible if everything else lines up. There's room on the grid.
so the town has a defunct landfill over here. That was examined, right? When Darren was.
We tried to get people interested in that, and they were interested, but it seemed to be too far to transport the power from.
Do you know how many acres that would have been for the solar? Do you remember?
If it was just a dump, it's not really that big.
Not that big.
Couple of.
Only a couple of acres.
3, 4.
So I guess it just wasn't enough power generation for them to tap into this stuff. So that's like this, right?
Well, when they look at it, we were keen on trying to do something with it. It didn't work out.
The figures I had heard, it's like, it can be like $1 million a mile for the lines. So if you're even just 1 mile. Start to, unless you have a really big project. You don't have this.
Well, like you say, the infrastructure over time is gonna change. So, you have the main transmission lines on what we'll say is the east side of the town. Not too far into Mylan on the west side is another transmission line, right? Like, how far will that finger stretch eventually? So, I mean, it's just what we gotta keep in mind as well.
And I doubt your major transmission lines will change anytime in the near future, but
They just redid those lines.
Yeah.
Just think of-
I'm just saying the finger's
Yeah.
coming off of it, right?
I know all of the utilities are, trying to map out and plan out, scope out where they're doing upgrades. Who needs upgrades, where do you need new infrastructure, not just upgrade the existing stuff? I'm just not sure exactly where the road at right now. Pretty sure they're still trying to figure it out. They probably don't even know where they're.
Do you know what New York State is doing about the possibility of nuclear?
Nuclear is not something that I deal with a lot in my everyday life, but anecdotally, I've just heard. I've heard the murmurs. I'm not saying that the state's considering this, but people in general are starting to talk about micronuclear. Yeah, a little bit more. So like lots of little small scale ones. But
Bill Gates is undertaking a big thing out in Wyoming right here. And I've been to other talks about nuclear, and the technology is really quite promising. And the plants are being able to be done in much smaller areas, right? And the waste products, anyway, no ideas about waste products. So I was just curious what the New York Center thing.
we don't have any set plans as far as I know. But I will say, when we were in the very beginning looking at that timeline of goals, it's 70% renewables by 2030, 100% emissions-free grid by 2040. That 100% emissions-free grid does not necessarily all have to come from renewables, right? So there is possible for helping us meet our goals. We don't have any incentive programs or any projects underway or anything like that I'm aware of, but I'm sure that conversation will continue for the next years, because you've been hearing about it. Well, I've been hearing about it.
The big issue is that AI requires so much more power. And AI is becoming universal, that we're gonna have to be generating more electricity than previously by a lot.
Yep.
And you're looking to, power cars and everything else, everything, trying to turn everything into electric, so less more capacity. That's why, like, when the applicant was, they kept, we have in the plan, the 25-year decommissioning plan, and I kept telling my board, assume this is gonna be here forever, because with the idea that they're, 25 years from now, we're like, well, we don't need this anymore, like, maybe.
It's probably, it's
Right, exactly.
25. Although, 5 years from now, I don't
Yeah,
like flying our cars, which I'm like, I don't know, but it's, I would say fairly likely to be in 25 years, but after that, 50 years, I won't do a lot of them over here, but people that are, they might just they want art ever. So I want to out of it. They'll have their little micros with like in the backyard and stuff. I don't know. I can't get that far from that from there. But all hands on deck for sure, because not just replacing the fossil fuel generation and fuel in our vehicles now, but so there's maybe more electricity. Regardless, just replacing second round.
well, I did remember, with the 10 gigawatt coal alone, like I just did back of the envelope calculation, it's like 750 municipalities in the state. You can divide that into, the 10 gigawatts, you get one of those, 10 megawatts per community.
Yeah, yep, and that honestly, that 10 megawatt goal is just for distributed solar, so it's 5 megawatts and below, so it includes all of your residential rooftop and all of that, about 10 distributed solar. But that doesn't even necessarily include the utility scale projects. The utility scale projects are rolled into the goal of 70% renewables by 2030. It's sort of technology agnostic. It could be solar, it could be wind, it could be
And what is the state draw for you, for
right.
yeah, that's sure.
Right, so. Yeah, most of what I wanted to show you guys is just, the distribution lines, the transmission lines. Maybe even find them in one spot, like see Hudson tool. Right now, our IEDR does not have transmission lines in it because of some of those concerns. We haven't got authorization to add that layer. But they're out there, you can find them. So find them both. Generally looking at one, you're only getting half the picture. Overlay it with other layers that are important to you. And some of that may be your agricultural districts too, right? Not just the zoning map. You want to see what else is going on around. So thanks. And again, you're welcome to have this sort of solution for you.
Thank
I
you.
think that was my last thing.
So was bring up with other layers, so it was a little hard to understand exactly how these projects interact with wetlands. Versus, the opponents to the project made a lot of, had a lot of questions and made a lot of hay about, it turned out like once like the scientists went there, the wetland that was listed on the map really didn't exist there. It was like done through whatever satellite surveys or something, or historical surveys. And once they looked at the soil and water flow and plants, it wasn't there. Well, what happens, like, if there is wetland, is it like, does that eliminate that land from the project being used, or there was some small
You typically have a buffer
buffer?
for getting the exact.
Okay, so you can't put if there's wetland somewhere, you cannot put a project.
Don't believe.
So it's all up to,
I'm not sure.
I think it's up to the permitting issue. So you got two different kinds of wetlands, right? So you got the state designated wetlands, which is based on vegetation. And then that has to be, they just lowered, the DEC just lowered that to, I think, 11.5 acres. It was 13 acres. So
They also said not just the lower acre threshold, but it's also not limited to what's been mapped. Like, even if it's not on the map, if someone goes out there and sees it, it's still.
Right. And then you have the federal wetlands, which is a rigmarole right now because of the Supreme Court ruling that supposedly they have to be connected to a navigable waterway. So are they really wetlands? Aren't they wetlands? But that's based on hydrology, right? And really to know what the soil types are, and that's why you'll get those ones that like will appear and then disappear and then come back, is because they're using the soil maps, and how accurate are those? So really, unless a biologist is on site to be able to test that soil type, you really don't know what you have unless you're out there. That's why for you, the zoning board or the planning board, site visits are imperative to be able to be able to go and look.
But if it is found, they're not like rolling projects over wetlands. Right, they're not just,
I don't think there's a technical limitation, and I wish I brought my colleague. Here, she's like a wetland biologist by training, she's on our team, she'll try to field in with this question, so I might have to set you up with her after the fact, because I don't want to give you the wrong information. I don't think there's a technological limitation to putting, quotes and files in there. But if we believe there's buffer word references supposed to avoid them, we're just gonna have to get back to it.
all kinds of.
Well, that's not really. Other people was.
Yeah, because, right, and because our engineer was kind of intimating, right, we were just like that, they'll just. You know, because they consider it non-permanent, they're just screwing these things in, that they'll just. Roll it right over, depending on. We don't know. Okay, okay. Yeah, sorry.
For us, I would think that, one thing that we have is the town spent money and had the Hudsonia maps done, right? But the Hudsonia maps are, they're all in PDF format, and you can look at them and it'll tell you exactly what everything is, within reason. For a planning purpose, it's phenomenal. But what we don't have is anything that is, all your slides are made through GIS, right? Through GIS capabilities. So we don't have those maps like where we can underlay it on top of the zoning, on top of the wetlands, on top of that. And it might be a good thing for the town to find out, we contracted with Hudsonia. I don't know how much we paid or what we paid. If we can get those maps in some sort of a GIS format, because I'm sure they're in that, where we would have the capabilities of putting that information in and overlaying it on.
Turned to base, like, same thing she might have done back in PowerPoint, just like messing around with a dropper that makes it hard to see through, like transparency spiders and stuff. I think she knows how to do GIS, but I don't actually did. I don't know how
What do you call it, layer, no, I might not have the Sony maps in there, but the sighting tool, the scenic Hudson sighting tool.
Yeah, the only thing would be missing from that, they probably remove the zoning, right? So you'll have to figure out how to get one that's true. And the same with our integrated energy data resource, IEDR. Lots of layers we put on that too. It's still a work in progress. So
Is that available to the public or that's?
yep, no, it's available to the public.
What is it called?
IEDR, Integrated Data Resource. The whole point of that is to make all of this more accessible and available to the public. I believe there's information about, so you can look at where solar projects are on there as well. But not the footprint, but like a dot
Right.
for the town, that sort of thing. There's some of those, I think we have mineral soil groups, so it's 4 on there, forgetting what other layers we have. I think we have the EV charging capacity maps on there as well. So much like there's the hosting capacity maps that we were looking at, like how much could we put into a line? There's other maps the utilities have been working on over the last few years, showing like where to do some heavy duty EV charging infrastructure and kind of view. All of these different things are going to that IEDR. It's not just a solar planning tool.
And a lot of these things, which is really cool, is it's a web-based mapping service. So as these maps get updated, like then when you bring in the data to yours, it changes. So if there's more that's added in a year, the map changes with that, which is, instead of we compile everything and then 5 years down the road, we gotta do it all over again, because it's all antiquated, right?
Same thing with the habitats for endangered species.
I know we used to have some layers for protected areas on there, just some that I forget exactly what types of protected areas there are, but lots of different.
Architect, or,
What about,
Historic.
computer and geothermal power? Um. I mean, I just know about it in terms of, um. Building new houses that you can put geothermal in. Are there any commercial applications for geothermal?
You can do the same type of geothermal people do in their homes in a commercial building. You can also.
Is that happening?
Our clean heating and cooling team at NYSERDA, apologies, because there's enough going on in the day. I'm just trying to keep track of my own work. It's hard to keep track of the other groups, but our clean heating and cooling team, I believe, is doing some like community level pilots where maybe they hook up a bunch of the buildings that are downtown and they're all gonna share, like a geothermal system or something like that. I know they were at least doing some studies
Spent some communities that. Creating it is quite expensive.
Yeah, so if you can share it, it's perhaps more cost effective. So I know they were trying to do some like downtown, shared systems. I don't know that any broken ground, but I know they were working with some communities across the state studying whether or not it was food. Yeah, then there's another type of geothermal power, which I have not heard about as scoring in New York, but I was just meeting with some colleagues from there's week. I believe this woman was from Arizona and they are drilling down to like hot rock and using it to run steam generators, which is kind of good. So that's another thing to do. I not heard any talk of that in New York. I do not know what our underground resources for rocks are. Yeah.
Like Iceland uses tons of.
Oh, so it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they have it just like coming up on its own, right?
So maybe you could speak to, other concerns that were raised by the opponents, to the project. Where like, these things are poisonous, they leach things into the ground and.
There's no evidence that I'm aware of, pointing to that. Of course, like any old piece of electronic equipment, there will be very trace amounts of toxic materials in there, but they're completely and fully encapsulated. It would take a crazy act of God to bring them out, especially in the quantity that is, a major concern. One panel getting a cracked glass is not gonna release anything. First of all, it's a part of windshield. Even if it wasn't, stuff's just encapsulated. So to my knowledge, that's not a concern, which is why I can see folks growing vegetables
Right.
underneath and praying for about.
Yeah.
If new information comes to light, I'd be very interested in it, but to my knowledge, I haven't seen anything.
That's what we kept asking for, like, do you have any evidence of this?
Right.
No, he's in three hours.
It's really said peer review. I mean, we have stuff like in our everyday life, right? We're driving our cars around. Oh, we all that stuff on it. I got much more. No, that too. Plastic is
And that's around us, we didn't think it's all.
There's an old George Carlin routine where he said that maybe Earth invented us so we can invent plastic, and then Earth itself in plastic after we're gone. So and then decommissioning and recycling slash, that was.
recycling's the tricky one. We are.
It's really. Oh.
My team is currently in the process of scoping out. Well, whoever has their windows cracked, yeah, I already know it's yeah.
I put the top off the Jeep.
So my team's in the process of scoping a recycling study now. haven't, finalized the contract or anything, so it hasn't started, but it's a real concern. I've never had a good answer to this question over the last couple of years. Pat says scoping out a study to figure out how we can make sure that we have available recycling capacity, either in New York or just available to New York, even if it makes more sense to put it in a neighboring state or something. We don't necessarily have to have it right here, but we need to make sure that recycling is available in the future when all these systems are being decommissioned or repowered, right? Get rid of the old panels, put new panels on, where they go. There are recycling facilities in the country. I think the closest one, it's either Pennsylvania or New Jersey, somewhere down there. And I know like Texas has one. There's like a handful of solar recycling facilities around the country. So they are popping up. We don't have a ton of solar panels right now to feed to them. So it's sort of a chicken and egg thing. Yeah, but we're trying to figure that out. Nobody wants to see, I don't see landfills or some solar panels. Right now, some of them probably are going into landfills in New York, much like any other waste, but when, in 20-25 years, when we have a much larger supply of panels, they could be sort of dealt with the new supplies, we absolutely know it's.
I mean, what,
It's happening.
so is there technology to recycle them or not even?
Yeah, there are recycling
Right.
centers.
They take them apart,
Country, yeah, they
take out the metals and,
get all the precious stuff in there, so you can, build more solar panels with it or build something else with it. So I think Solar Cycle is one of the companies that's doing it. I'm blanking on the names of some of the others, but there's a handful that are, doing the thing. It's just sort of low volume right now, so they're not everywhere. And it probably does not make sense for New York to spend solar panels, to Texas. By the time you do that, you sort of defeat the purpose of trying to save the materials, with all the gassy waste, and things like.
well, the regular recycling program is on the indication, look at it very skeptical. We're just shipping most of our stuff to Malaysia or somewhere now, Thailand.
Not great, we do better, and we certainly want to do better with solar. We're doing it to be better for the planet, so why not go all the way for the grave?
So that, property, or you have more on environmental stuff?
No good.
Property values, that was another issue, the best we could discern. They had to study the Berkeley study.
What's Berkeley National Lab?
Yeah, it seems to indicate to us that there's a very small effect in areas where you're directly looking at them. And also these are different states out west, probably flatter, more open, where in Massachusetts and Connecticut, there wasn't any effect. To the more analogous states.
I'll believe that what you said. I know there were different effects in different states. I can't remember which states had which effects. I'll think that's nice to us and no impact.
Right.
Yeah, and that's not to say that here would be the exact same thing. I don't know. But my recollection of that was sort of on average, even with the states out west and the states on the East Coast that they used, it was maybe 1.5 or something.
Within a half month.
Right. Within a very short distance. And then there's other studies. Wind has been studied a little bit more extensively by some of the same folks that did that one, right? And there's an update to it that came out, I don't know, within the last year, I think, by same folks, by the author on all of these, one of the authors on all of these, showing that for some of those wind projects that have been around for a long time, the home prices would sort of meaningfully decrease after the project was announced. And then they would bounce back a few years after the project was built. And people were like, oh, it's not that bad, right? So it was more just people thought they would go down, therefore they went down. But once the project was built, they sort of rebound.
That's what,
I'm not
Sarah, you've been saying that this whole time. Once it's built, all
It
the,
will have no impact.
yeah, all the people.
And one that we dealt with that have no
Fuel had
values at all,
Yeah.
at all, at all.
seems fit.
Except,
Yeah, this one does seem particularly.
this town gets all of the protection of the land that's gonna be in conservancy, which is substantial over the possibility.
I usually try not to take opinions that are good opinions on individual projects or some sellers in general, you know, but this one seems like it's pretty well. Things that one person's gonna see it, they have the or plant conservation easement on it.
And-
Pollinator stuff.
And they planted trees along that view line. They planted a double row of evergreens. Obviously, it's gonna take a long time for them, you know, put evergreens. But, you know. The applicant was pretty good, in my opinion, as far as without us even, you know, saying it. They would come back, they would hear the concerns and come back with some sort of mitigation.
Aggressively addressed visuals, they did not address, they hid the forest. As much as
So I don't know how you could hide it, really, you know, but. Yeah, the far,
I mean, chopping down trees is never fun, but I was like, a lot of projects across the state have to cut some down. To make it work. Depends on what kind of forest is talking about. I'm not a forestry expert, but tree growth. It's more valuable than stuff that hasn't been growing for as long, right? And, you know, over the years, the emissions saved from the solar project outweigh the greenhouse gases that are feeling the current same value for this.
Look,
I'm not to say that you want to chop them all down.
no, that's one of the main problems. As invasion into core forest area has to do with habitat.
Continuity.
The habitat issues are very significant when we start losing your core forests. Because they really divide this huge amount of habitat. And this particular project was on a long ridge of forest that went for a couple of miles. And so you're
Like the animal highway.
whatever, it was just a lot of core forest that's good amount or substantial. There was other forest that I didn't care about at all, that sort of shrubby kind of stuff, people would, but.
I had something else. I don't remember. But no. Or forests. There was fire, that was related to the fire, should be the question. How often do these things catch on fire? Well, we could tell with only like batteries are the only thing that really light on fire.
The batteries have gotten a lot of attention in the last year because we've had 3 fires in the state last summer,
Oh.
which is a total anomaly. To have that many, B, to have that many in one state in that short period of in such a short period. There's a national, no, international, I think, even database tracking energy storage fires. We were a large percentage of that for some reason, like it was just a fluke. I choose to see it as a bit of a good thing in a way. Because nobody got hurt and there were no significant environmental impacts that we know of from studying those fires so far. So nobody got hurt, no environmental impacts, and I think it's nice that New York State sort of gets to lead the way now with our interagency fire safety working group that we've ever put together and figure out how to not let that happen again. So we're sort of leading the way across the country now because that happened here. So that's why I say maybe it's sort of a good thing because we're kind of in a good position to deal with that. New York City's been, you know, digging into battery fire issues for many years now. So we just kind of have the internal knowledge to figure that out. Not that it's going to be complicated. I think we're a good state to be dealing with the issue and figuring out which we are. So yeah, that is a concern, or we are trying to figure that out.
But it's only the storage.
It's, yeah, mostly. I mean, anything can catch fire. I would say the solar panels are more likely to deal with fire with what's around them catches fire. The inverters that, you know, switch it from DC to AC can sometimes have little problems, but honestly, I think I've only heard, this is just anecdotally, I have to keep track of data, right? And I've only heard of 1, maybe 2 incidents in many years of even the inverters having fire, and again, if nobody got hurt, they could deal with it in other places that they used to do. So I don't think I would be any more concerned about. Structure. Perhaps a little less so. Shouldn't get any specialized equipment necessarily to deal with that. I know of one project where in order to meet the access requirements, a regular fire truck wasn't going to be able to get into the site far enough, so that developer is purchasing an all-terrain vehicle for the fire department that can like get into the super slots. But that's not a great bit of sales.
Well,
Well, that's special, that's right.
we made sure that the road, the trucks can get up the road. They're gonna be able to they're gonna be driving tractor trailers up there.
You can kind of get it here. This was like a
Yeah,
200
right.
megawatt.
And we made sure that they could circumnavigate the whole project. Yeah, of the fire department, yeah, so.
Pretty good.
So what type of regulation, like when I was up at I met, I think it was a rich boss from, that's how I ended up with Ian, from Oris,
Oh, Chuck.
Chuck.
Yep.
And that's Ian Snow call, and because I went to the planning conference in South Carolina. And, talking with him and then different people there, because he did a presentation, obviously only on the bigger ones. So what type of regulations? Is there anything the state's gonna like have a problem with, like, or you know what? I guess I've heard some stories. I was up there, right? Some towns tried to say like you couldn't build anything higher than 5 feet or whatever within this area, or you know, you couldn't cut down more than 1 acre of trees, and they're like, no, that you're doing this to prevent solar projects. So what? I mean, what's from what you heard us talking about, trying to do this some sort of tree, what would likely be what mitigation, where if you're cutting down X number, so we'd have to have some consideration of what kind of forest you're looking to cut down. And then if you are going to cut down, you're going to mitigate by having replanting on other places on the property, or buying other property, town and planting, or
Sure.
yeah, or putting it, yeah, conserving some other piece of property, or putting into some sort of fund where the town could then go. And I don't think we're going to look at, I mean, what does the committee think about somebody in the beginning? They were trying to look for like a radius, like no more places within X radius of each other, kind of thing. That would look, because they would probably look disfavorable.
To me, it's site sensibility. If the site is common sense to have it there, then you have it there. And to start drawing radiuses, I just don't think that's sensible. Without a great understanding, like we're talking about, the maps are going to be changing consistently over the years. So if you handcuff yourself, then eventually down the road, if you have a great site, then you might be handcuffed, and then we're back to the drawing board again. My personal opinion.
Rather have a patchwork? Or maybe I could put them all together. I don't know. So like those are things to consider, right? Start drawing radius, like you said, force the patchwork too. So I don't know. Is there any other type of development that have a different radius like that? I feel like I don't know, lawyer would have to weigh in on that one, but I don't let's say these players, I'm sure how that particular thing over.
But have you covered that, like, your agency, now that you have to like go fight municipalities over like they're having this onerous, like, on its face, trying to prevent, you know, the land.
Yeah, like, towns near here who made it basically impossible to do that or scale, right?
I wouldn't say NYSERD is fighting them. So the Office of Renewable Energy citing Chuck first for that. So they're the ones that are permitting those larger utility scale projects, 25 megawatts and above. And ORES does have authority to override local laws that are deemed unreasonably burdensome. ORES has a whole set of regulations with like, setbacks from different types of setbacks from a residence that's not participating in the project. For example, it has to be at least 250 feet, other like property line setbacks, things like that. Also regulations. So as long as those are met, they approve a project. But on top of that, the projects are supposed to meet all of the applicable local laws too, which are typically well, I don't want to say typically, which are sometimes more restrictive than what those default ORES regs are. If it is something crazy, like a town saying you need to have a 3,000 foot setback, from a house, it makes it impossible. That's an extreme example, but ORES would, I would think. That's if we should say that, if I'm reading the ordinance, we are not going to apply that portion of the law, to this project. If the developer requests,
But this size doesn't have enough.
now
Interesting.
the size is all permittable, so ORES, that's only gonna happen for 25 megawatts and above. And again, only if the developer requests relief from a certain,
One of the concerns I have
and they deem it to be unreasonable.
is that in Pine Plains, we have a major landowner who owns over 2,000 acres of Pine Plains. With, at the moment, no plan to develop it. Right.
Right. The armhole.
That is, if there's a potential, they could decide that we're gonna put some of this land in solar. In fact, I'm kind of surprised they haven't done that.
Well, the problem is the transmitting, the lines, the hosting capacity. Could you click on to the map? So it's up in that top left corner, that whole set, they own basically that whole corner of the town. It's the Durst Corporation.
No, some,
And yeah, it goes into Milan. I mean, they could put one of the big ones there, like, the RS ones, or,
If there were,
but as far as we understand, as of right now, there's not,
it doesn't look like there's room right
there's no
there.
room there.
Yeah, unless
I
there's
can't
other
transmit that,
transmission lines that you can't
you
see.
can't get the drift.
Right.
That's the case now.
You could see some more 1.5 to like 3 megawatt projects perhaps over here if they wanted to burn.
Well, I've always thought that, once we get into, they actually get going again. What happened was, this has been going on for 20 years. And then they were just starting it back up, and then the pandemic hit, and we did scoping. And the project has gone from a 2,000 home development to now, with the golf courses.
300.
It's 260, with a resort, with outdoor activities, a small minor golf. But then once the supply chain issues hit, they suspended it. But I mean, I can see, as part of that project, putting in solar for them to supply their homes and things that they're daily, why not?
Yes.
I spoke on, or my time it was. Anyone, those would be built, the geothermal power. But I don't know, we don't have to look at that, but, it's just a large, huge piece of land that we don't have control of. Okay, that's kind of my general floating concern. And, we don't know what their plans are. They have huge amount of land over in Northeast.
I don't believe they have any plans at this time.
No, they don't.
Right.
But it's a floating issue because there's one landowner with such a major piece of property.
The last I heard from them,
Yeah,
that it's probably something for their grandchildren.
yeah, we've heard that, but it's
Wow.
like, here it is. It's like, oh, it's big stuff. It's very good.
They haven't done anything in Northeast either.
Well,
They're actually they've sold a couple pieces.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they just sold it, yeah.
so, all right, well, let's, I don't know, I think we're about coming to the end here. Let's have any other questions?
I think what you were trying to get at before when we got this conversation, we're asking to be involved by terms to outbreak. My team does go out, do things like this, so we will go out and meet at the request if they want any towns that are doing the more restricted things to try to block and just try to answer questions and get facts out there. But there's a lot of times I think some of those restrictions are based on maybe things that aren't necessarily true, and it's afraid, so we're like, oh, how do you need this, right? So we try to go out there and we're not fighting them though. And if we're invited out, they want our opinions or their resources and. Yeah, I'm happy to be changing hearts and minds where it's possible, but we're not like beating down the doors, say. To us, and do what we tell you. Nobody has to do that.
Well, the issue, the what, and that we came up against this as far as, you know. It's
Very, boil surgery.
what, is. I guess who's the trusted source? They view the state as pushing this, they view, so. I mean, they were accusing our engineer of it, and our attorney, and us, it was. So it's like, I don't know who they were listening to besides their own ex, but to be honest. It would be a voice that they would have come in and said, oh, well, if that person says it.
It's a trick question.
Mm.
I think there's a continuum, right? Where probably developer tends to be the least trusted. I like to think that maybe the states and we're public servants, right? Like, I'm not making anyone about it. It's probably that's we're trying to do the right thing. So I would like to think we're maybe a little bit more trusted and perhaps someone like Steve Hudson and is maybe a bit more trusted us, Sam more of a development presence. And then like, I know we work with folks like we're not cooperative extension and have like most of their employees live great communities they work in. So they've all been, not all, but a lot of them have been getting sort of up to speed on these topics. And so if you have those folks who want, maybe you can reach out to them.
Well, as a town, we tend not to be particularly restrictive in our approach to things, which that's where I can get right. I don't like very much restriction.
Well, if you're a landowner, you mean as far as being a landowner and being able to do what you want with your land?
I just general, I don't like restricting people. I don't, I think that people should try to be good neighbors and that people should be responsible. But I don't like telling them what they can and can't do. And I'm totally in favor of feeling this global catastrophe that we have in terms of climate change. Sort of I comment on particular restricted. I'm going to take focus. It's restricted.
All right, well,
Well, I don't think we're gonna, I mean, we have we did zoning for this tier 3, where we could have a large project and our one experience was not painful. Let's say, I think it was not painful.
yeah, well, it's a lot of strong feelings by the people that live in that area.
It was very NIMBY, very NIMBY. Unfortunately, or not controversy.
But I must say, the decision that we got on the Article 78, I think validates the law, validates the process that we went through. And the hard work my board put into a year and a third or whatever it was into the project. Yeah, thank you very much, Jen, for coming and talking with us. So I think it's been very helpful. Yeah. Ian's been great too. He's talked a lot. So, Tricia, you end the, we'll end the meeting and then.
Any of the stuff that I was not able to answer, feel free to reach out either me or Ian.
Okay.
Just in case.